Everything in your life has been building to this moment, and whether you're fully aware of it or not, your brain has already started preparing for the shift. July 15 is not just another date on the calendar. It is a neurological threshold. When we declare a moment as final, as complete as the turning point, the brain responds by reorganizing its priorities. There's a powerful effect that occurs when you decide something is ending and something new must begin. Your entire neural circuitry lights up differently. This is the day when your nervous system receives a new instruction. Everything changes now. This isn't just about motivation, it's about neurobiology. Your brain is wired to recognize patterns, loops, and chapters. It's constantly trying to predict what's next. When you consciously declare a final step, especially when attached to meaning and urgency, it forces the brain to release neuromodulators like norepinephrine and dopamine. Norepinephrine heightens focus and makes the mind alert. Dopamine instills motivation and the emotional anticipation of reward. And if the moment is grounded in your internal truth, your calling, your vision, your desire to be more than who you were, the chemistry becomes exponential. These neurochemicals act like a reset button, giving you the clarity to move, the energy to begin, and the fire to follow through. That's why July 15th matters. Not because something external will change you, but because this is the day you assign meaning to. You decide that whatever was holding you back is no longer compatible with your biology, your future, or your identity. You decide the waiting ends now. That choice alone re-engages the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for planning, execution, and self-control. When you were indecisive or hesitant, that region went dim. But now, as you commit to forward motion, it lights up. The system is ready. This is also where attention becomes everything. The brain is constantly flooded with data, millions of inputs per second, but the reticular activating system, your attention gatekeeper, decides what gets through. It only lets in what you've declared as meaningful. That means if you tell your mind, this is the day my life begins again, it starts scanning your environment for evidence, opportunity, and confirmation that the change is real, and it will find it. Not because the world suddenly changed, but because your perception, your filter did. What you used to ignore becomes visible. What you feared becomes manageable. What seemed impossible now feels inevitable. And there's one more mechanism at play, your emotional system. The limbic brain, responsible for memory and emotion, needs to feel this moment. You cannot just think your way into a new life. You must feel it in your chest. You must rehearse what freedom feels like. You must taste victory in advance. When logic and emotion align, your nervous system believes it's real. And when that happens, change becomes not only possible, it becomes necessary because you are not properly, 100% not ready or able to best produce it. So the limbic brain is the most necessary. This is how you build new wiring. You speak it, you feel it, you act on it. So here we are, July 15, a date marked not by chance, but by choice. The final step has arrived. And with it, the old stories lose their power. The waiting ends, the fear burns off, the fog clears. What you've sensed in your spirit for months, or maybe even years, finds a doorway. Everything shifts now because you're ready. Not perfect, not certain, but ready. The brain doesn't need certainty, it needs commitment. Declare it, anchor it, let your nervous system feel the shift, and then take one step. Because once the brain believes the shift is happening, the rest of your life starts moving with it. There comes a moment in every person's life when the familiar becomes unbearable, not because it is necessarily painful, but because the brain and body begin to outgrow it. That moment is often hard to describe. It's not loud, it doesn't arrive with fanfare, it feels more like a low-frequency signal in your nervous system telling you, you can't stay here. That's what July 15 represents. This isn't just another sunrise, this is a neurological line in the sand. Your entire system has been waiting for this signal, the permission to evolve, the permission to break the loop. When the brain senses finality, something remarkable happens. It opens the gate to neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself. That rewiring doesn't happen when we're passive, doesn't happen when we're drifting. It happens when we declare something with precision and emotional weight. This is the last day I live small. This is the first day I live aligned. And in that moment, everything in your biology takes that command seriously. Dopamine is released not because a reward has arrived, but because a future worth pursuing is now in view. The chemistry of anticipation begins flooding your system, pushing you into movement, curiosity, and drive. But even more important than the decision itself is your attention. Your attention is the most valuable resource your brain has. It determines what you see, what you miss, and what you attract, your reticular activating system. This tight bundle of neurons in your brainstem is like your life search engine. What you consciously decide to focus on, it will filter into your awareness. So if you tell yourself, everything shifts now, your RAS starts looking for alignment, new habits, new people, new opportunities. You're not waiting for the world to change, you're changing your filter, and that filter becomes your new reality. What we must understand is that the human brain does not respond to vague goals. It responds to specific, emotionally charged instructions. If you say, I need to change, nothing happens. But if you say, today marks the final step, this is the day I turn the page, the emotional brain, the limbic system wakes up. And when the limbic brain is activated alongside your prefrontal cortex, your logic and your emotion working in unity, you get true identity transformation. This is not a shift that lasts for a weekend. This is a rewiring. This is a recalibration of who you are. And this leads us to the most essential point. The shift doesn't happen outside of you. It happens through you. Too many people wait for external validation to justify their internal readiness. They wait for a sign, for permission, for clarity. But neuroscience proves that clarity is not a prerequisite, it's a consequence of action. You act first, then your brain reorganizes itself around that new belief. This is why July 15 matters, not because the world said so, but because you did. You gave it weight, you made it matter. And once you do that, everything changes. Your body posture changes, your tone of voice changes, your sleep, your motivation, your focus all begin to shift. Because the final step is not just a concept, it's a biological event. Your nervous system begins building a new model of reality. It starts treating the future you as real and reachable. You will start noticing different thoughts rising. Old temptations will feel dull. Old habits will feel foreign. Not because you're trying to be someone else, but because you're finally aligned with who you already were under the layers of delay, fear, and doubt. So let July 15 mark the decision point. Let it be the fork in the road that you never return from. The final step has arrived, and with it, your new life begins. You are not late. You are right on time. Everything you've lived, learned, and endured has led to this exact moment. Don't wait for the feeling, create it. Signal to your brain, we've crossed over. Then move in the direction of that signal. The shift isn't coming, the shift is here. There is a mechanism in your brain called the salience network. It's the system that tells you what matters and what doesn't. It lights up when something meaningful is about to happen, when your internal world collides with your external decisions. Today, July 15th, is not just about inspiration or personal development. It's about the salient signal hitting its peak. Your brain is tracking this moment. You've crossed the invisible threshold from preparation into execution. Everything in your biology has been moving toward this, a decisive moment where your identity, your actions, and your beliefs finally align. The most powerful transformations don't begin with perfect plans. They begin with emotionally anchored decisions. And neuroscience confirms that the fastest way to rewire your brain is to create an emotionally significant shift, what researchers call critical periods. These windows of time aren't created by chance. They're created by intention. When you say to yourself, this is the final step, your nervous system marks it as a closing loop. And that matters because the brain loves resolution. It's addicted to completion. When something is left open, an unresolved decision, a half-finished dream, your brain loops that data endlessly, draining energy and focus. But once you decide, once you give your brain finality, it releases that loop. Space opens, clarity floods in. That is why today is sacred. It's not about pressure, it's about pattern interruption. The final step means the old rhythm of your thoughts, behaviors, and triggers no longer fits. Your system knows it. The deeper parts of your consciousness, what neuroscientists refer to as the default mode network, are already remapping your internal story. That inner voice that used to echo, maybe someday, now shifts to, now is the moment. This is not motivational fluff. This is neural alignment. When your story, your self-permission, your actions converge, the brain no longer fights you, it follows you. You're not forcing change, you're becoming it. The second key lies in your attention system. Most people underestimate how powerful their attention really is. But attention is the control panel for your entire experience. It's not just noticing, it's sculpting your brain in real time. Every time you focus on a fear, a doubt, or a limitation, you strengthen the neural circuitry that supports that identity. But when you declare that, everything shifts now. When you say, I am no longer available for that version of me, you give your attention a new assignment. And what you assign attention to, you build. This is where the shift becomes neurological. Your reticular activating system, which determines what you notice and what you ignore, gets a new filter. You'll start seeing opportunities that were always there but previously invisible. You'll hear a conversation that unlocks a solution. You'll remember a resource that suddenly makes sense. These are not coincidences. They are neurobiological reflections of a deeper choice. When the brain believes you're serious about change, it recruits the environment to cooperate. Your physiology begins supporting the life you're stepping into, and it starts today. But change requires emotional gravity. You cannot build a new neural pathway on logic alone. You must feel the shift in your body. That feeling, the visceral sense of, I'm done waiting, done hiding, done circling the same mountain, is the catalyst. Your emotional brain, especially the amygdala and hippocampus, store the memory of moments that matter. When you embed emotion into a decision, it becomes unforgettable. And what becomes unforgettable becomes permanent. The final step only works when it's infused with meaning. That's why July 15 is your imprint. It's the day you told your nervous system, mark this, remember this. We begin again from here. And now the third key, action. You cannot think your way into a new life. The brain doesn't believe what you say, it believes what you do repeatedly. Your first action after deciding is the most important one. It sets a precedent. It tells the motor cortex, the limbic system, the cerebellum, this is real. This is the new rhythm. Small actions with high intention rewire faster than big actions with low belief. You don't need to change everything in a day. You need to do one thing with full conviction. That is enough to shift the neural architecture of identity. So what happens now? You act, not in fear, not in hurry, but in alignment. You breathe into the discomfort, you feel the hesitation, and then you override it. The brain doesn't require certainty, it requires repetition. When you act in the direction of your future self, even before you feel ready, your brain adapts. It starts pruning the old pathways and reinforcing the new ones. The past begins to dissolve, not because it is erased, but because it is no longer relevant to the pattern you're reinforcing. This is how real lasting transformation happens. One clear decision, powered by emotion, followed by action, and repeated until identity catches up. This is the final step, and it begins now. There are days when life whispers, and then there are days when it speaks with thunder. July 15 is that day. It is not just a date, it is a declaration, a signal to the brain and body that a chapter has closed and a new one is already unfolding. Your nervous system is constantly interpreting time, meaning, and momentum. And when you designate a moment as final, the brain treats it as a biological event. It reorganizes itself. It resets its filters. It starts reinforcing a new identity. And what once felt impossible begins to feel inevitable. Not because the circumstances change, but because you change. The first shift occurs in the circuits of attention. Your brain is not interested in passive inspiration. It is looking for cues that matter. That's where the salience network comes into play. It's the internal radar that says, this is significant, pay attention. The moment you say, this is my turning point, that network lights up. Suddenly your thoughts gain clarity, your vision sharpens, your behaviors begin aligning with your new path. This is not abstract, it's structural. Your brain is quite literally remapping itself in response to your belief that today is different. What most people never realize is that breakthrough doesn't happen in the mind alone. It must be encoded in the body. The limbic system, the emotional center, must feel the shift. That's why repetition without emotion rarely produces transformation. But when you combine a clear decision with emotional intensity, you trigger neuroplasticity. Your brain records the moment. The amygdala flags it as a priority. And from that point forward, your habits begin reflecting the story your nervous system believes. If you say everything shifts now and you mean it with your whole system, then your entire biology starts moving in agreement with that story. Then comes the pruning process. Your brain doesn't just build new pathways, it also eliminates the ones you no longer use. That means when you stop reinforcing the habits of hesitation, procrastination, and self-doubt, your brain starts deleting those pathways. It's a process called synaptic pruning. In simple terms, what you don't use, you lose. But that's a gift because it means you're not stuck with any part of your past identity. The more you reinforce the new rhythm, the faster your system lets go of the old one. And all of this begins not with massive effort, but with a moment of precision. This is the day, no more delay. Your nervous system doesn't care about your goals unless those goals are tied to something emotionally urgent. And urgency doesn't mean panic, it means clarity with weight. On July 15, when you say this is the final step, what you're doing is setting a timestamp. That timestamp becomes a neurological reference point. Every time your mind tries to pull you back into old patterns, you can trace your new identity back to that moment. And when your brain has a timestamp, it builds momentum. Momentum's not random, it's neural, and now it belongs to you. But none of this locks in without movement. You must act in a way that reflects the shift. This is the moment where neurobiology meets behavior. You don't need to act big, you need to act clean. Action that is grounded in alignment sends the strongest signals to the brain. It says, this is who I am now. The motor cortex, basal ganglia, and the cerebellum, all parts of your movement system begin coding that new pattern. And if you repeat the action long enough, it becomes automatic. This is the science behind change. Not hope, not hype, but neurophysiology catching up to identity. There is also a final truth. Your future isn't waiting for you in the distance. It's coded in what you decide to repeat today. Your body, your brain, your energy, everything is listening. The patterns you reinforce become the life you live. If you let this moment go unclaimed, your nervous system will default back to what's familiar. But if you claim it fully, emotionally, physically, you set a new trajectory. Not because you forced change, but because you became it. July 15 marks the end of permission seeking. It is the final step, the day everything within you begins to reflect everything ahead of you, and it starts now. There's a phenomenon in neuroscience called critical threshold recognition. It's the point when your brain acknowledges that what used to be tolerable is now no longer acceptable. That's what July 15 is. It's not just a nice idea. It's not about hype. It's a neurological threshold, a moment when your mind and body align to say enough. The brain doesn't always need a new plan. Sometimes it simply needs a new standard. When you decide this is the final step, your entire nervous system reorganizes itself around that truth. And the power of that clarity shifts everything. Your brain is constantly interpreting patterns. These patterns become habits, and those habits become identity. But identity is not fixed. It is fluid, responsive, and reprogrammable. The only requirement for that reprogramming to begin is a high emotion signal backed by a concrete decision. When you mark a moment, like July 15, with that emotional clarity, your brain says, this is real, reinforce this. Neurochemicals like dopamine and acetylcholine get released, priming your brain to wire in new behaviors. The past might still echo, but the neural allegiance shifts to the future, and that future begins not someday, but today. This moment is about more than breaking old habits. It's about dissolving the story those habits were built on, the narrative that said you were almost ready, the loop that told you to wait for more clarity, more signs, more validation. But neuroscience is clear. Action generates clarity, not the other way around. The decision to move before you feel ready is what tells your brain this version of me is obsolete. And in response, it begins pruning the old identity. Thoughts that once held weight begin to lose their charge. Reactions that used to define you start to feel foreign. This is not magic, it's neuroplasticity in motion. Everything in your biology follows your attention. The moment you declare everything shifts now, your attention system, particularly the reticular activating system, gets new instructions. It starts filtering the world differently. You begin noticing patterns of possibility, allies in unexpected places, resources you used to overlook. Your environment hasn't changed, your perception has. That's the real shift. What you used to label as coincidence now reveals itself as alignment. And that's because your brain is no longer operating in survival mode, it's operating in creation mode. Creation begins with focus, and focus begins with a decision that the old noise no longer deserves your bandwidth. There's also something deeper, something primal. Your nervous system has memory, not just of pain, but of potential. It knows when you've lived beneath your capacity. It recognizes when you've held back your voice, your gifts, your movement, and it begins to create internal friction. That friction isn't failure, it's fuel. It's the body's way of saying the new version of you is trying to emerge. And when you say this is the final step, you remove the internal resistance between desire and action. Your biology stops pulling you in opposite directions. It synchronizes, it accelerates, it supports the new standard you've chosen. But no shift locks in without embodiment. Words without movement stay dormant. You must act like the decision has already happened, because the truth is it has. Your nervous system responds most powerfully to repetition. That's the anchor of change. You don't need 1,000 steps, you need one consistent action practiced with conviction. That consistency rewires your baseline. Your energy changes, your posture, tone, attention, and appetite for excellence all shift. It is not willpower you need, it is congruence. The more your actions reflect your declaration, the faster your identity transforms into the version that can carry what's next. So take this moment, July 15th, and don't treat it as a fleeting burst of hope. Ground it, root it, breathe into it. Let your entire nervous system feel the closure of the old and the arrival of the new. Declare that this is not a restart, it is a rebirth. The final step is not small, it is sacred. You are not who you were last week, you are not who you were yesterday. You have stepped into the chapter that your biology has been waiting for you to claim. And now that you've chosen it fully, clearly, and emotionally, it's time to walk in it. Everything shifts now. And this time it's permanent.